So here's White versus the Philidor defense, lesson 6. This is actually a game by Shirov versus Klinova. And this is from 2006. So here we see a slightly different move order. E4, D6, D4, Knight F6, Knight C3, E5. So now the regular move order is of course what you're familiar with, but let's see how this could have been played. So E5, Knight F3, D6, D4, D7, or Knight F6, Knight C3, and then there you see Knight D7. So in any case, it's practically the same game. One reason that black would begin with D6 is to avoid something like the King's Gambit, and other classic E4, E5 openings. So we have D6, D4, Knight F6, Knight C3, E5, Knight F6, Knight B, D7, and G4. Now, of course, you could just continue with Bishop C4, Bishop E7, castles, Rook E1, C6, and A4. Now that you've stopped B5, White can count on a risk-free slight space advantage. On the other hand, if your opponent is likely to have played this position a lot of times, if you want to upset him with something new and get him out of the I'm slightly inferior but safe comfort zone, you can learn something from Shirov. So here we go with the move like G4. Knight takes G4. Now the threat here was something like the threat here is G5, and so he could play something like H6, but then G5 can follow anyways. So and then even if they trade pawns, it's still destroyed a lot. His kingside castle position, black's kingside castle. So we should probably accept the free pawn anyways. So knight takes G4. Rook G1. Knight Gf6. Bishop C4 with the threat of knight G5, and then F7 drops. H6. It's useful for White to have provoked this move, as the H6 pawn is a potential target, and Black's defenses along the G file are undetermined. Imagine, for example, if he developed G7, G6, Bishop G7, and castled. With the pawn on H7, this would be rock solid, but with the pawn on H6, White can play Rook takes G6. Okay, Bishop E3. White has a straightforward plan for mobilizing his queenside pieces and castling long. In contrast, it's much harder for Black ever to evacuate his king from the center. C6. D takes E5. D takes E5. Queen D3. Here, rather than D2, as White has something up his sleeve. Queen C7 ? And Black totally missed the up the sleeve. What could have followed, and what Shirov played against in a different game, was Knight H5, Bishop takes F7, check, King takes F7, Knight takes E5, check, Knight takes E5, giving up the queen but collecting a massive material in return. Queen takes D8, Knight F3 check, King D1, Knight G1, Knight takes G1, King C1, and Knight H3. And this is a complicated game, and Shirov ended up in a draw. So anyways, Queen C7. Bishop takes F7, check! Exclamation point. Black should always be on the lookout for sacrifices on the f7 square, especially when playing a grandmaster like Shirov. King takes f7, queen c4 check, king e7. So let's say king e8. And then queen e6 check, and black is totally lost after bishop e7 with rook takes e7. And that's exactly why Shirov wanted to open up the g-file for the rook. So now, let's say instead of the bishop move, black played king d8 at this point. So then queenside castle, and there's not much that can be done against knight takes e5. Intending a big check on f7, which might even end up in mate, depending upon how it's played. So here we see, queen to c4 check, king e7. Knight h4. The knight was barred from g5, but it finds another way to infiltrate the black camp. Knight b6. Black loses rather tamely by handing back a rook and remaining the exchange down. Now let's say that black had played a different move like rook g8. Knight g6 check, king d8, queenside castle, queen a5, freeing the c7 square in an escape bid. The knight takes f8, rook takes f8, rook takes g7, king c7, king c7, bishop c5. The entrance of the bishop decides matters. Rook e8, bishop d6 check, king d8. Now, if king b6, then knight a4 check wins the queen. And so he's not going to play that. So knight d8, queen f7, b5, queen takes f6 check, knight takes f6, and totally awesome is bishop c7 checkmate. So that was a doozy, but let's back up. And here we have knight b6. Knight g6 check, king e8, bishop takes b6, a takes b6, knight takes h8, g5, knight g6, bishop c5, and castles, and at this point black resigned.